Most people didn't even realize it was a zombie apocalypse until it was too late. The medical community simply labeled it as an unknown disease that stimulated a mental disorder, including cannibalism. But the more people began to contract the disease, the more everyone realized it was something more, much more. The zombies were nothing like we expected. For one, not everyone who was attacked survived, largely because a dead corpse wasn't capable of reanimating like people used to fantasize about. This was the primary reason why the apocalypse didn't spread overnight. Possibly, only 1 in 20 people attacked ended up carrying on the disease. The rest died. But that was the problem. The zombies were actually alive, which made it all the more horrible to defend yourself when dealing with people you knew. If the beasts were capable of getting to you, then they would regress to an animalistic and predatory nature, just like one might expect of a zombie. But if they are hindered from their effort, they would become civil and use any means necessary to get you to willingly comply, including pleading. "Daddy, please let me in," my daughter begged me, just outside my bedroom door. "I need you, Daddy. I'm scared." I hadn't eaten in 3 days, and I had barely slept at all, largely because my recently bitten daughter hadn't slept at all. At least I still had water in the bathroom, though it was from the toilet. I had realized almost right away that water would be my biggest necessity, especially since the power had gone on the first day, so I'd committed to relieving myself in the bathtub instead. My wife had never come home, so I assumed she must have stayed at work. I didn't want to think about the alternatives. I had picked my 12-year-old daughter up from school early because she wasn't feeling well, only to find out she'd been attacked in the bathroom by a kid much younger than her and hadn't told anyone. Within an hour of getting home, the change had already begun happening, though I didn't notice until it was almost too late. When she tried to rip my throat out, I barely made it to my room in time. Since then, I had received no contact from the outside world, other than what I could see outside my window, which wasn't encouraging. My phone and computer were both in the living room, the short distance essentially the same as being on the other side of the world, and my daughter stayed at the door, continuing to beg for me to let her in. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she finally admitted. "I won't hurt you, but I'm just so hungry. I can't help it, Daddy. Please." It was the first time she admitted what she really wanted. Up until that point, she had tried everything else. Lying, manipulating, threatening, everything. The truth was the only thing that she hadn't tried. "Daddy, please," she continued. "I don't want to be alone. At least let me bite you so we can be together." That gave me pause. I'd never considered such an option. I could never kill her, even if she was a flesh-eating monster. So then, should I just join her? I sighed heavily, realizing I didn't have the choice. At least, that's what it felt like. Slowly, I crept towards the door and bent down to see my daughter's vibrant red eyes on the floor peering in. She grinned when she made eye contact through the small crack. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too," I said breathlessly. My entire body was trembling now. I couldn't believe I was really going to do it. The safest option would be to just stick my fingers underneath the door, risking having it bitten off, but the crack was too small. I wouldn't even be able to fit my pinky finger, which meant, "Promise not to kill me?" I heard her sigh heavily. "I'm sorry, Daddy, but I can't promise you that. But you're a lot stronger than me. You can protect yourself." I wasn't sure if that was true. From what I've heard, the people infected with the disease had above average strength, but then again, she was only 12. I got to my feet, suddenly feeling lightheaded both from the lack of food and from the situation. Then, slowly, hesitantly, I reached up to unlock the door. Click. The handle was already trying to turn beneath my grasp. "I love you, Daddy," she called out cheerfully, shoving the door open despite my effort. She was grinning ear to ear, her vibrant red eyes excited. I only realized then that I'd made the wrong decision. Within a matter of seconds, my daughter's grin vanished, replaced with a ferocious, snarling beast. She immediately crouched down, ready to lunge for my throat. I quickly grabbed the board I had pried from my bed frame earlier and smacked her as hard as I could in the face. Although she was certainly very strong, she was also half my weight. She smashed into the floor a few feet away. I expected her to get back up and go at me again. Instead, she slowly pushed her upper body off the floor and looked at me innocently. "Daddy," she whined. "That really hurt. Please don't hit me like that again, Daddy." "Sweetie," I said breathlessly, "you tried to kill me." She pouted. "But Daddy, I'm really hungry, and I'm afraid to try to eat someone else. What if they hurt me?" I kept the board up and ready, knowing she was waiting for an opportunity for me to drop my guard. "Honey, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to willingly let you eat me." Unexpectedly, there were tears in her crimson eyes. "Daddy," she whined again, sobbing. I waited for her to jump at me again, but she didn't. She just laid back down and curled up on the floor crying. "Daddy," she whispered in between sobs. "I'm really sad, and I'm really scared." She sniffled. "Won't you please hold me?" It pained me to see her like this, but I knew what would happen if I did. However, if I was really going to join her, then I would have to let her bite me one way or another. It just couldn't be the throat, or else I wouldn't live long enough to become like her. I'd already seen on the news how gruesome a bite to the throat could be. After a few more seconds of crying, she sniffled again and glanced up at me. "Daddy, if you aren't going to let me eat you, then help me. Please. I'm afraid to try to eat someone else. Can't you go bring someone here for me to kill?" I stared at her in shock, too baffled to even defend myself as she tried to jump at me again. But she didn't. She waited patiently for me to respond. I flinched when she slowly sat up and folded her hands in her lap. "Please, Daddy. I'm just a little girl. I'm too afraid to attack someone myself. But if you bring them here to me..." My heart was racing, even more so that when she tried to attack me. Suddenly, my hands were sweaty, and I felt lightheaded again. Was she really asking me to help her kill another person? And more importantly, was I willing to do it? I mean, if I became like her, then I'd probably be doing it anyway, right? I tried to swallow the sudden lump in my throat. "Okay," I finally whispered. "I'll go find someone for you to eat." "I love you, Daddy," she exclaimed cheerfully. "I'll wait right here for you. I promise." I hesitated as I slowly lowered the board, but she remained seated like she said, grinning ear to ear again. I took a step forward the door, and then another, and another. She didn't budge. Finally, I was in the hallway, carefully backing away from my bedroom. When I got to the living room, I heard her call out again. "Please hurry, Daddy. I'm really hungry." I paused, deliberating my ethical dilemma. "Do they have to be alive?" I finally asked in a shaky voice. I could hear the cheer in her voice. "Freshly killed is all right, Daddy. I'm not a picky eater." With trembling hands, I reached up towards the top of the fireplace to retrieve the small black handgun I kept hidden behind a picture of me with my daughter and wife. I gulped. Movement from the corner of my eye caused me to jump and point the gun towards the source. She was standing in the doorway to my room, watching me impatiently. The gun wasn't loaded yet, and as far as I knew, she was well aware of that. She pouted again. "Come on, Daddy, hurry! I'm really hungry!" I quickly grabbed the bullets behind the loose brick, loaded the gun, and then headed for the door. When I reached for the handle, I hesitated. "I'll be back, sweetie," I called out loudly. "I love you, Daddy," she replied from my bedroom. I turned the handle and opened the door. A lot had happened in the last 3 days in our subdivision, although I had no idea what was going on in the rest of the world. On the first day, there had been a lot of yelling, with the occasional screaming. Many of the zombies had been able to just walk home and open the front door to their unsuspecting families. After all, other than the cannibalism, they were fairly normal still. It wasn't a problem for them to fish out their keys from their pockets and unlock their homes. However, by day 2, once it was clear that most of the easy victims had been eaten, many of them left. It was also on day 2 that some of the survivors turned, rummaging through the neighborhood for a snack before they took off as well. As I walked out the front door, I squinted at the bright light from the sun rising over the horizon. Even though the electricity had been out for the last 3 days, I still knew what time it was. I glanced down at my watch to see that it was just after 8 a.m. However, it might as well have been the middle of the night with how miserable I felt. 3 days of little to no sleep would do that to a person. Not to mention I felt weak from not having eaten anything. I didn't actually feel hungry though. I probably wouldn't have been able to eat even if I had food available. Not with the stress of knowing what happened to my little girl. I sighed heavily as I checked that the safety was off of my gun. I had to do this. I had to get her food. Killing her wasn't an option, and I would be doing it anyway if I had been bitten, right? I quickly made my way down the concrete driveway and cautiously turned onto the sidewalk. As I looked at the houses lining the streets, several things became clear at once. First, I needed to convince someone to come home with me willingly, because dragging a dead body might be too suspicious. I had to think long term. If people had survived, then I couldn't let them see me doing this, or else I'd only be able to procure one meal for my daughter, which meant the person would probably have to be someone I knew. Otherwise, they wouldn't trust me. Second, I needed to make sure they saw I wasn't a zombie myself. But how could I prove it to them? My eyes. That was the key. As far as I knew, they all had red eyes, but mine were green. That should convince them. I also needed to think like I wasn't really doing this. Otherwise, I might seem suspicious. How would a normal person in this situation act? A person who wasn't trying to get a meal for their zombie daughter. I took a deep breath as I walked up to my neighbor's house, knocking on the door. I knew I'd probably have to find a few houses, but this seemed like a good start. John, it's me! I need your help, John! There was no movement in the house. I gently checked the doorknob to see if it was locked, which meant he wasn't home or was holed up inside. A car was in the driveway, but they had two vehicles. Maybe his wife was home? Sarah, are you there? Please, Sarah, I need your help. My daughter isn't feeling well. You're a nurse, right? I checked my surroundings, then to make sure there wasn't a zombie stalking me after hearing my shouting. But I was alone. John, Sarah, someone, I need your help. I pounded on the door again. All the zombies left yesterday, and my daughter is really sick. I need to know if I should try taking her to the hospital, or if she'll get better on her own. I pounded on the door yet again, realizing I'd probably have to try another house. Finally, I sighed heavily and turned around, just as a muffled voice came from behind the door. It was Sarah. Nick, what are her symptoms? She asked quietly. Sarah? Oh, thank goodness, Sarah. Can you come see her? I'm just the next house over and I have a gun. I can't, Nick. I'm sorry, I can't trust you. John, he was one of them and I didn't even know. She took a shaky breath. Just tell me what her symptoms are. I glanced around again, seeing that there was no sign of John. Really, there were no bodies anywhere. It appeared that most people had been killed inside their homes. I doubted she had killed him, though, because otherwise I was sure his body would be lying around somewhere. Maybe he tried coming home and she was able to keep him out somehow. For some strange reason, the zombies didn't try breaking windows. It seemed like it would be an easy way in for me. But they stayed away from them. If they couldn't get in through the front or back door, then they eventually gave up to find easier prey. At least, the rest of them did. Except my daughter. I'd have to ask her about the window thing later. Sarah, you can trust me. Just look at your window and see. They all have red eyes, Sarah, but mine are still green. I then moved over so she could see. I saw her glance out from behind the curtain, staring at me for a moment. If I recalled correctly, she was only 26, 5 years younger than me, but she looked so young and innocent when I saw her. I quickly held up the gun for her to see that too. You'll be safe out here, trust me. She nodded slowly. Okay, let me get my first aid kit. Does she have a fever? I shook my head. I haven't been able to check. She does feel a little warm, but I can't find the damn thermometer anywhere. And she hasn't been bitten? She asked hesitantly. Sarah, would I be standing here if she had? When she didn't say anything, I sighed again. No, Sarah. I checked her all over. Plus, they seem to turn pretty fast, and we've been home for the last 3 days. She nodded hesitantly. Okay, I'll be right back. I waited patiently for a few minutes, trying to push aside the guilt I was feeling, by keeping my mind blank, or thinking about the nice weather, or thinking about sports, anything. The birds chirping in the trees was really peaceful. Suddenly, the front door opened, and Sarah came out and hesitantly brandishing a massive knife. Sarah, you won't need that, I reassured her. I have a gun. None of them will even get close enough for that to be even useful. And they've all left anyway. She nodded hesitantly again, setting the knife down on a small tabletop by the door. She then closed the door behind her and locked it up. Despite all the noise I had made, she stuck close to me and kept silent. I did too, but for a very different reason. Realization was starting to dawn on me with what was about to happen. As I opened the front door, I let her step inside, pretending like I was making sure the coast was clear outside before locking the door behind me. Amelia, I'm home. I brought Sarah with me, I called out to her. I heard her coming down the hallway immediately. Wow, Daddy, that was fast! Sarah gasped when she saw my daughter's red eyes as she rounded the corner, immediately turning on her heels to escape. I grabbed her instantly, already having stepped between her and the door. Her eyes were panicked and terrified as she looked up to me in horror. I'm sorry, Sarah, but my daughter hasn't eaten in 3 days and she's really hungry. I hope you understand. She shrieked when my daughter grabbed her by the arm and yanked her on the floor. I turned my head away when my daughter's teeth cut the scream short from digging into her neck. I hope you enjoyed the first 4 parts of that story. There's actually, I think, 2 or 3, maybe even 4 more parts of the story. So let me know if you're interested in hearing that, and if you are, I'll try to add the last couple of parts, and then I'll probably take all 1 through however many parts there is, and smash them together and make one big super story. So I hope you enjoyed it, and come back next time for some more spooky stories. And as always, remember to face your fears.